Afternoon, everyone. The February 18, 2026 work session of the Gwinnett County Board of Education is now called to order. Without further delay, I'm turning the meeting over to our interim superintendent, Dr. Al Taylor, to bring us our first presentation.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Therese, and good afternoon, everyone. At this time, we will have Donnell West, Chief Learning Officer, introduce her team members for this evening's presentation. Chief West.
Dr. Therese, board members, and Dr. Taylor. This evening, Bob Chase, Director of Instructional Resources and Support, supported by Dr. John Valentine, Executive Director of Enrichment and Support Programs, and Dr. Tasha Guadalupe, Director of Health and Physical Education, are presenting the results of our sex education instructional materials pilot. In your folder, you will find a copy of our presentation slides, as well as a one-pager outlining the instructional materials review process for your reference. Our presentation will walk you through an overview of the review process and the improvements made along the way, followed by results gathered from each review committee. We will close with our final resource recommendation for board approval. We have also set aside time at the end of our discussion for any questions you might have. With that, I turn it over to Bob Chase to get us started.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Dr. Therese, board members, Dr. Taylor. Thank you for giving us this time to walk through our recent review of sex education instructional resources. Sex education is one of the units within the health curriculum that the state requires to be taught in grades 5 through high school. This work aligns to our blueprint for the future in support of the strategic priority equity in the areas of opportunity and access, as well as equitable resource allocation. By ensuring each and every student has access to quality instructional materials, we provide enhanced support designed to improve student learning outcomes. The review, pilot, and adoption process also aligns to several board core beliefs and commitments, a few of which are listed on the slide. Securing feedback from a wide range of stakeholders and piloting in schools representative of all levels and all board districts places emphasis on equity and inclusiveness for all students. This is a brief overview of the extensive process implemented prior to making recommendations to the board. Starting with the second step and circling back to step 1, after a solicitation period, vendors set up their resources at the Instructional Support Center as part of our Vendor Expo. The Open Teacher Review occurs during the Expo, and teachers are invited to, in person or virtually, review all submitted resources and provide feedback. For a minimum of 4 weeks, the instructional materials are made available to the public. Again, in person or virtually, members of the community have the opportunity to review and provide feedback. The Instructional Resource Review Committee, or IRRC, is an application-based committee. Selected members participate in an all-day, in-person review and provide additional community member feedback and insight. The Community Health Education Advisory Committee, or CHEAC, is a required committee when reviewing materials pertaining to sex education, AIDS, sexual abuse, and assault awareness and prevention. CHEAC review is required by state law, and our district procedure requires CHEAC approval prior to piloting. The Teacher Review Committee, or TRC, is a core group of teachers tasked with reviewing the resources, reviewing the data collected from previous steps, and ultimately recommending what should be piloted in classrooms. The pilot is the period of time in which resources are utilized by teachers with students in select schools representing all board districts. A minimum of 1 teacher per school then attends a consensus meeting. These pilot teachers collaborate and come to a consensus as to whether a resource should be recommended for district-wide adoption. Finally, the Division of Teaching and Learning reviews all data and feedback and prepares a recommendation to the board for adoption. Going back to the board communication step 1, procedure P.IFAA was updated in response to constituent and board feedback so that instructional resources requiring CHEAC approval, all stakeholders and all review committees will review all vendor-submitted resources. Historically, the Teacher Review Committee coincided with the Vendor Expo, meaning only the resources selected to be piloted were available for steps in the process, such as the public review and the IRRC. With this update and improvement, all stakeholders and all review committees had access to and reviewed all vendor-submitted resources. One additional note, all review committees and all stakeholders had access to the resources in their entirety, their original content. Differentiating the content between abstinence and comprehensive was implemented at the pilot phase. We're always looking to improve our processes. These first 3 changes are also included in our district-adopted procedure. As I just mentioned, a significant shift was ensuring that all stakeholders and all review committees for instructional resources that require a CHEEK review have access and the opportunity to review all submitted materials. To ensure that this happened, both the public review and the IRRC were moved earlier in the process, while the teacher review committee was moved later. Additional review time was provided to educators during the open teacher review and to the community during the public review. We did continue to use Qualtrics for surveys, but we were also able to use Qualtrics for the parent-student opt-out process. In order to increase communication with families, we used Parent Square twice for the opt-out opportunity, and we worked with schools to reach out to any family that did not respond to the Parent Square communications. To strengthen alignment throughout the pilot process, we provided enhanced training for pilot teachers, as well as the pilot school administrators. We have also heard concerns about the process and transparency. We take these concerns seriously and want to explain both our reasoning and our commitment to improvement. We hear the transparency concerns, and you are right in that we do not have a formal sign-in requirements for meetings, and this is an area that we can strengthen. Moving forward, we will work to balance the 2 important values of supporting committee members as they participate, while also ensuring appropriate process transparency. We understand the questions about why the same resource received different recommendations from committees that were 20 years apart, and there are several important factors that have changed. Our district demographics and educational needs have evolved significantly over two decades. The current committee reflects today's community across all board districts. Both then and now, committees include invited staff and community members representing each district. Different outcomes don't indicate a flawed process, and they reflect that our community, students, and educational landscape have changed, and that our materials selection process appropriately responds to those changes. We are committed to finding better ways to document participation while maintaining consistency in our process for instructional materials adoption. Prior to the pilot, we heard multiple times how critically important it was to provide more choice for our families. Although we had implemented several iterative changes in this process, we had not yet optimized a way to support the individual choices of families and allow for greater differentiation with this content. An idea was presented to explore how we could actually capture the choices families preferred and offer choices for the type of material or content that students would engage with. What seemed like an incredibly complicated and nuanced idea was operationalized in our pilot this school year. Prior to selecting and assigning the instructional resource to students, we gave families the option to choose what best supported the learning experience and content that their student should have. Parents had the choice to select an abstinence-only curriculum, a comprehensive curriculum, or opt out of the unit altogether. It is also important to note at the elementary level, abstinence was the only option, other than opting out. This slide outlines a high-level summary of the numbers for this pilot. We notified 168 vendors, 6 of which participated, and we piloted 1 resource based on what was approved by the CHEEK committee. We had 30 schools participate with all board districts represented. 112 total teachers were a part of the pilot, and that pilot spanned 3 weeks. The next few slides provide summative snapshots of data collected for each step of the process. You have been provided with a binder that contains all of the results in detail. The Open Teacher Review, which is open for all teachers, had a low response rate of 12. The top 3 choices resulting from the open review were Choosing the Best, ETR, and Goodhart Wilcox. The public review was open to the community from September 30th, 2024 to November 15th, 2024, and yielded a total of 552 responses. Choosing the Best was the top choice across all 3 grade bands. The IRRC meeting happens in person with a review of each of the resources by groups. In this review, Choosing the Best was the top choice for elementary, ETR HealthSmart was the top choice for middle school, and Goodhart Wilcox was the top choice for high school. During the Cheek review, the following vendor resources were approved by level. At the elementary level, Choosing the Best and ETR. For middle school, ETR, Human Kinetics, and Goodhart Wilcox. And at high school, ETR, Human Kinetics, and Goodhart Wilcox. In addition to the different sex education resources, this Cheek committee also reviewed a resource from Human Kinetics to meet the need for the CTAE course Fundamentals of Athletic Training and Sports Medicine. This resource was approved by Cheek and later approved for implementation by the board. The following resources were recommended for each level by the Teacher Review Committee. Elementary, ETR. Middle, ETR and Goodhart Wilcox. And at high school, ETR, Human Kinetics, and Goodhart Wilcox. You will notice some of the resources that Cheek approved were not selected by the Teacher Review Committee for elementary and middle. Based on the recommendations from each review, we elected to pilot ETR HealthSmart and Choosing the Best at elementary, and ETR HealthSmart for middle and high school with abstinence-based only and comprehensive options. Choosing the Best opted to not move forward with pilot participation, and as a result, we piloted ETR HealthSmart abstinence-based only for elementary. This captures the overall ratings for each level based on the curriculum options selected, and as you can see, the teacher ratings were positive for these resources. We also capture feedback from students. What you see here reflects a summary of the student reviews. The red bars represent positive responses, while the blue bars represent negative responses. There were 4,162 secondary students involved in the pilot. 2,663 of them completed the final evaluation survey, which is right at a 64% completion rate. This brings us to the latter steps in our process, the consensus meeting and the decision meeting. Both of these meetings resulted with a recommendation to adopt ETR HealthSmart. The estimated cost for this adoption is outlined on the screen, and these funds are currently included in our budget. During tomorrow's business meeting, we recommend that the Board of Education adopt the instructional resource ETR HealthSmart for the sex education unit in our health curriculum. Thank you again for your time and this opportunity. This does conclude our presentation, and we stand ready for questions.
Good evening. Thank you for that presentation. I have a few questions. Just want to confirm that for elementary, it only includes grade 5?
That is 100% correct, yes, ma'am.
And not, okay. And then I just want to make sure I heard correctly that abstinence was the only option for elementary, or otherwise the option was to opt out?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. So the parents of elementary school students had two choices. They could opt out of the unit entirely or opt into the abstinence-based program.
So there's no comprehensive for elementary?
No, ma'am, we did not pilot any comprehensive materials for 5th grade.
Does a comprehensive exist for elementary?
No, ma'am, we did not pilot. I do not know that answer to that question, but we did not choose to pilot.
I can tag into that one. As a part of our process for designing abstinence-based and comprehensive with the ETR HealthSmart curriculum, we get the curriculum in its entirety, and then we customize based on the options we want to present for families. So as we were going through that process and identifying which lessons and which resources would be most appropriate for that grade level, it ended up being all the content that would be considered for abstinence-based only. So we could customize if we wanted to extend that unit of study to add additional lessons.
Okay, thank you. And then with opting in or opting out, could you walk me through that process around what a parent would need to do to opt out? And what is our due diligence? So if a parent may miss it because of busy schedules, or if there's a form, what if the student forgets the form?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Stone. So currently, the district has a sex education letter that goes out to all families or guardians that are for students enrolled in a health class in grades 5 through 12. And at high school primarily, I'd like to clarify that the majority of students take health education as a 9th grade student. The district has opted to send that letter out as a district, and for this particular pilot, we chose to send it out a second time with the district opt-out letter. From there, the schools also are required to send the same letter home at least 2 weeks prior to instruction. And then additionally, within this particular pilot process, we asked them to reach out and try to make contact on multiple occasions with any families who had not provided a response, because at the secondary level, for example, they had to either opt in or opt out based on those two approaches to the curriculum this time. At the elementary level for this particular pilot process, the only option was to opt out. So since there was no opt-in, schools were not required to reach out further from those district letters as well as the parent letter that was sent home from the school.
Okay, thank you. And then is there a process for confirming receipt of the form even after the multiple times that we have reached out to parent, guardian, caregiver?
So with using Qualtrics, the system will capture that information for schools, and there's multiple ways for the schools to access that, whether it's through school reports, through Teacher View. The teachers can go in, and ultimately, along with the district, the schools as well as the teachers share a responsibility in ensuring that they are going through up until the day of instruction to verify that any student that has opted out is removed from that curriculum and they are placed in an alternate setting.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. My last one is around supporting our students in K through 9, particularly around, let me get my notes here, age-appropriate sexual abuse and assault awareness and prevention. As we know that sexual abuse is one of the most underreported forms of child abuse, and I hear stories all the time. One that stands out to me, a little 5-year-old who reported to her teacher that a family member had touched her, but she used the term cookie, right? So she reported that to her teacher, a mandated reporter. Teacher didn't think anything beyond it, and it wasn't until much later that this student ended up in DFACS foster care for a separate issue, and they realized that this student had been abused over and over and over again. So what are we doing or what is the district's plan to support our K through, especially our young children in this area?
So right now, based on state rule, there is an annual requirement, K through 9, that the district provides annual sexual abuse and assault awareness and prevention. Currently, the district implements child lures, which that would address those younger grade levels. And then obviously, we have a Teen Lures program as well that would extend that. If a student is enrolled in health, so at the elementary level in particular, there is a seat time requirement around students K through 5 to be enrolled in a health course. As students progress to the secondary level, it just has to be offered, so there's no guarantee that a student at the middle school level would receive health education. And then, of course, there's that half credit requirement for graduation in 9th grade. And so if a student is enrolled, of course, we address that from a curriculum standpoint, but students who are not in a health education, the only way to probably curricularly address that would be through that Child Lures and Teen Lures program. In full transparency, that vendor is no longer going to be offering, and so we are in the process of looking and identifying another vendor, and that will have to go through the CHEAP process, but to be implemented in the following school year. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm not even sure where to start. I have had issues with this process throughout the process. Let me start with the survey. The survey was problematic for our Spanish speakers. There were issues with that. One of the things that would not let you finish the survey was you had to pick two choices. So if you didn't have a second choice, you couldn't finish the survey. That, to me, doesn't make sense. You should be able to finish the survey with a single choice if you wanted to, because especially when you look at, from my perspective, what was represented from an sexual risk avoidance side of things, there was really only one choice. And if you were in that camp and you didn't like the safe sex, comprehensive sex ed approach, you basically were defaulted into having to pick one just to finish the survey. So there was a problem with that. We had 2,300 people who started the survey, didn't finish the survey. Multiple reasons, I'm sure, for that, and you did allude to that in your comments. So to me, that is problematic as we go through this process. I've tried to go through this binder and figure out how you guys ended up with ETR Health Smart. The only thing I can think of as an advantage is that it's aligned with the curriculum that we do for the rest of health. So it's a similar platform. But when I look at some of the rankings of other similar programs, I see rankings just as high. And I also see all over the map in terms of which one you would pick the best or pick. And so I think we need to start over. And I hate to say that because it's a lot of work, and I get it. But 5 years ago, Dr. Guadalupe stood in front of this board and said, we encourage adoption of choosing the best for 7th and 8th grade. They had a new version, and that's why they came to us for adoption or for approval. And she said 3 metrics are what we're concerned about here. One is at-risk behavior. Our numbers under the usage of choosing the best, those numbers are down. Student performance, we want to see an increase, and that number is up. Anxiety, student anxiety was lower. So we had positive metrics from the 3 important things that we care about when it comes to our students going through the process. Now I'm supposed to believe that just in the last 5 years, all of a sudden our community has changed. And when I look at these numbers, out of 112 participants, teacher participants in the pilot, was it 112?
Yes, sir, 112 teachers.
How many responses and surveys do we get? I saw a teacher survey component. There were 12. And of those 12, 2/3 of them said that their first or second choice would be choosing the best. So why is it that we've got a majority there, but we're not considering it? Why is it we have a committee that we don't even know who's on the committee? Or we know who's on the committee, but when constituents ask who's on the committee, the only thing we can provide them is a list of initials. To me, that's not going back to the core principles of this board and the way we've operated the system under transparency and openness. So help me understand how you got to ETR Health Smart when the data points don't consistently map to that solution. Oh, the other question I had, I came to know later in the process that there's an abstinence version of ETR Health Smart versus the comprehensive sex ed version. Was that curriculum up for review when we did that? Was it a year ago and made all of those available? Was there any distinction between the abstinence version and the safe sex version. A lot of questions. Try to help me out here.
So I'm just going to try to recap what I think I hear as questions. One was the open teacher review responses, which reflected the responses for 12 teachers, like kind of explaining those numbers. The second was around how we made the decision to only move forward with the ETR Health Smart. And if you don't mind repeating that third question, the last question you just said, I want to make sure I capture that.
What did I say? It's a good question.
Oh, did we pilot the abstinence
Yes,
version? the last time?
Was the abstinence version one of the dozen or so curricula that was available for our community to, because that's another one. I mean, again, that number of completed surveys was huge in terms of direction from our community. So, go ahead.
So I'll try to, I think, just in terms of that shift in the process for at every phase of the way, every committee member reviews all of the resources. So when that happens, odds are you're going to end up with some variability in which some of what's going to be those top resources selected, because every group is going to maybe recommend one or two that might be different from the previous group. And we saw that kind of show up in the results, where some things were approved and recommended by Cheek, where other things weren't. So that shift in the process also created some opportunities for variability in results from committee to committee. I'll next tackle the question around the 12 responses for the open teacher review. In last week's board update, we kind of sent the total number of health teachers. I think that was one of the questions we received. So that we had about 400-ish, 401 health teachers that were, just from running our roster, teachers that are assigned to teach that course. Of the 400, 12 teachers participated in the open teacher review. So that's why that number is representing, and I think we had the percentage on the slide, a little less than 3% of all the health teachers across the district. So, again, it's not reflective of all the teachers, but for the teachers who participated in that part, those teachers, and again, that was optional and voluntary, those were the results from the teachers who reviewed that portion. The decision to move forward with just one resource, there's a combination of things that we took a look at. Like one of the things you named is like that familiarity that our staff would have and students would have with the resource, how it's designed and how it's set up. That was one factor. Other things that we considered, and I'll unpack the customization that needed to happen a little bit later, but the ability of the vendor to be able to customize and design the units of study in a way that we could implement within the time frame that we were looking for. So usually with customizations comes a cost associated with any customization that we do. In working with the ETR Health Smart, it was easier for us to customize and still ensure that the content that we wanted to have covered was readily available and accessible to students. So that was one of the other decisions. So one of the things that's implied in that response is cost. We want to make sure that we are mindful of what we are investing in piloting resources and what it'll cost to implement. So really thinking about that cost factor was critical in that decision-making process as well. The last question around the last time, I think we brought this information to the board for review and approval. Did participants and teachers, did they pilot the abstinence-only version? The answer to that is no. During that pilot, they had the full resource and the lessons we had selected at that time for that pilot. Again, Some of the changes that we made in the process came directly from our constituent and board feedback to really think about how do we better customize the resource that allows greater family choice and flexibility to have access to that required unit of study.
Right, so one of the pages that I saw as I went through this book was that, right, the numbers of those who opted in and those who opted in for safe sex or comprehensive sex education, those who opted in for abstinence, those who opted out completely. And then I do want to say this, I very much appreciate, because I think this is the right approach, that for those who did not have a choice, we use the abstinence-based approach. Because there's nothing that the state actually prefers a risk-reducing version of the curriculum. I don't see that as I look through the curriculum of either option from ETR Health Smart. I don't see a lot of the risk communicated to our students that we're trying to get them to avoid. It's more about, since you're going to do it, here's how to try to do it safely, as opposed to here's the full information. So the thing that strikes me is that if I do want to say I appreciate the fact that we defaulted back to that base level of providing what the state requires and not going above and beyond. My personal view is that that's the way it should be in its entirety, because any family can choose to go as deep into this subject as they want to go. Totally up to them. As a school district, knowing that there's a formula for success out there that's been researched that shows that if you delay family formation until after graduating high school and getting a job, you have a less than 2% chance of living at or below the poverty level. You get that out of order, you have a 6 in 10 chance of living at or below the poverty level. So as we think about this as a board, my concern is who are we willing to sentence to a life at or below poverty because we didn't give them all of the information that they needed concerning the risks associated with this behavior. A behavior that in the state of Georgia is illegal to consent to at under 16 years of age, which is the vast majority of the kids we're talking about taking this information in. So it's a huge level of responsibility for me. And if we're going to default back to it, if the majority of our kids are going to take an abstinence-based, then I think we should go back and ask our community between ETR Health Smart's abstinence version and choosing the best, which one would they prefer? Because I think our community, if we present this in a fully factual and neutral way, the majority are going to say they would like to have the information that's presented through choosing the best in terms of the risk, the failure rate, the efficacy, all the different things that go into these critical pieces of information that I think are at best glossed over in the Health Smart. Can you give me any examples specifically of how Health Smart does cover risks associated, true risks associated with the behavior, and how failure rates among the normal population, not among fumbling teenagers, might look like, right, in terms of efficacy and failure? And most of that, of course, is only in the pregnancy arena, not in the sexually transmitted infection or sexually transmitted disease arena.
I think we can provide that alignment to the state standards and ETR Health Smart and tease out very specifically how and where it addresses at-risk behavior and the impact of that. So that's something, I don't think I have it readily available right now, but that is definitely something that we can get for you and provide in an upcoming board update.
Okay. I'm really curious about that. The last thing I'll mention, and of course I'm going to reserve the opportunity to jump back in if something else comes to mind, because again, to me, this is one of the most critical things that we can do as a board because of the lifelong impact that this can have. To use choosing the best for Gwinnett County, if cost is an issue, first, it's customizable, just like HealthSmart is. But the cost is probably less than $200,000. You're proposing a curriculum that's going to cost just under $2 million. So if cost is an issue, and I know there are things we could spend another $1.8 million on, then we might want to consider something that our community supports, the open teacher review supports, and costs 1/10 of what's being proposed.
Thank you so much for this presentation, and there are a lot of things that Mr. Knudsen said that I certainly support. My first question is, you had mentioned that Choosing the Best decided not to move forward with the pilot. Is there a reasoning behind that? Can you explain that, please?
Yes, sir. The response that we had received was that their program was designed to really start and end over a large group in an age group, so it would start in the 5th grade, but the benefits would really be through that middle and high school. And because the middle and high school was not elected for pilot, they selected that the validity of that elementary only by itself might not be sufficient enough.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that their pilot would have warranted a good, diverse outcome for us to really get a better feel of what at least I would have liked to see, knowing how truly important this decision is to our whole student set, K through 12. Looking at the survey results, I share a lot of the same concerns that Mr. Knudsen does, both on the teacher side, both on the IRRC side, coming to very specific items on how a lot of the numbers came in for Choosing the Best and HealthSmart. They were so close, and looking at even the community survey results where they overwhelmingly chose Choosing the Best. And I'm wondering if, maybe the community knows something that we might not know. And, being the community encompasses obviously our parents, those that are out there supporting our students and our parents. I'm wondering if they're referencing some data that I've seen in the past, not only data that I've been close to for many years prior to me joining the board and looking at our comprehensive sex ed program that we teach our students, but data going back to between the years of 2010 to 2020 where GCPS used Choosing the Best, and data that shows other school districts like Chatham County, Clark County, DeKalb County, Dougherty County that used ETR HealthSmart and other comprehensive sex programs, and students in the age brackets of 15 to 17 had significantly higher STD rates than GCPS students did. So maybe the community spoke volumes in that data, knowing that information. Again, I don't know that for sure. I'm hypothesizing. So, speaking out, there's a lot here to talk about, and I think it's important to understand where I'm coming from, listening to my community, listen to the folks that have done the research on Choosing the Best, ETR HealthSmarts, and really, kind of stepping back, I'm really happy that we are offering the option for parents to choose the abstinence-based option, and of course to opt out. But, abstinence-based portion carries its own challenges. Knowing that HealthSmart, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the research that I've done, abstinence-based still talks about sexual orientations and gender identity ideologies are still coming into play. And these are things that I personally have feelings towards. graphic drawings of external genitals. These are Health Smart they don't use the words girls, women, female, or men, boys, male. They use body with a vagina and boys with a penis. I'm sorry, I'm being graphic, but this is what's in this book that you all sent us. And this is the 5th grade curriculum. So just, I'm speaking in reality terms, and I apologize for my words, but this is something that is close to me and is a big decision. This is why I think I take a lot of what Mr. Knutson said in terms of this pilot and what has worked for GCPS in the past and how we might have, again, missed the mark to allow for choosing the best to participate in this opportunity. And so I too would have to push back and say, hey, is there an opportunity for choosing the best to come forward and give us a chance? Reading this book, again, and I thank Ms. Stone for clarifying, this was only for grade 5 and not, and was that correct? Kind of throwing this out there? Yep.
That's grade 5.
So, reading into the last chapter, this is a section on gender roles and expression. And is this, again, my feeling is this something that we need to be sharing with our 10-year-olds, who have other strong feelings about what character they want to choose for a video game. So again, these are things that our community really looks at and have brought to my attention that has been out there and that I certainly, want our other folks to be aware of. So I'll open it up to that.
Yes, thank you, because I think that that's an important point of clarification regarding the hard copy resources that was provided to the board versus what was actually a part of the unit of study. And I believe in our communication when the hard copies were requested, we gave the context like this is the full curriculum. It's not teasing out the actual lessons. But in the binder that we provided and also in the letters that went home to parents, and it's in section 4 of the binder we provided to the board, for the 5th grade lessons, it was old me, new me, understanding puberty and new responsibilities, understanding a boy's body, understanding a girl's body, and seeking information and support. Those were the only units and lessons that were taught as a part of the unit of study.
So this is in my binder under section 4. Okay.
Just as another note, because I anticipate more questions will come up, for the comprehensive unit for families that opted for comprehensive health, it included all of the abstinence-based lessons and then some additional lessons as well. So students who received the comprehensive unit of study, or they chose that option, they would have received all of the abstinence-based lessons as well.
Okay. I still always, like to make sure that our teachers follow the curriculum and do the right thing for our students. Because I've seen with my own eyes and heard with my own ears, teachers come to previous board meetings in years past and have openly said that they've taught outside of the AKS and have taught their own thoughts and ideologies. And that concerns me because this is one area where certain teachers can express their own opinions when it comes to these particular topics. And so it is very concerning. So again, I'm just one person speaking, and that's a concern that I have. But I appreciate the detail, the level of detail put into this, and all the work that the teachers and the IRRC and obviously the community feedback is extremely important to me as well. So thank you all for this.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Dr. Valentine, Dr. Guadalupe, as well as Mr. Chase. I do want to just get a little clarity for my sake and for the sake of those attending to the meeting. Can you once again share the composition of the Instructional Resource Review Committee, who makes up that committee, as well as the CHEEK committee?
Thank you, and yes, ma'am. There were 30 members of the IRRC committee. 24 of them were community members. There were also 6 GCPS employees. That's pretty often in that the employees are really applying for to serve on that committee as a parent or community member, meaning of the 6 GCPS employees that were included in the 30 total IRRC members, we had an ISC cluster nurse, an ISC case manager, a substitute teacher, and a high school scheduling clerk, but there were 2 teachers as well. So it is predominantly a community member-based committee for the IRRC.
And for the, go ahead. For the Community Health Education Advisory Committee, it's comprised of community members, local school level administrators, parents, teachers, as well as students. We invited, I believe it was 25 members, 21 attended, 3 did not show up the day of, and of that, those 3, 1 was a parent and 2 students.
So did some students participate in the CHEEK?
Yes, state rule requires that we have at least 1 male and 1 female, either in 11th or 12th grade, participate. We currently invite 5 students so that it represents each of the 5 board districts. This year, 3 students showed up, 1 male, 2 female, and 2 were absent, and that was partly probably due to the time of year, being in May, being upper level classmen. It's hard to attend based on testing and those other responsibilities they have.
I appreciate you sharing that and knowing that we had students who participate in the process. I understand the sensitive nature of the topic, but we are a board that values student voice, and so it is delightful to hear that we were able to engage students in this process. I do want you all to provide us a little bit of back history on why we had to repeat this process. I know that the last time you came before us with the adoption, the board decided to go through the process again, and I think it was because there was some, I guess, mistrust, or there were board members who felt that the process was not implemented in the way that it should have been. Can you explain what you all did differently this time around?
Sure. There are a few things that we did differently this time around, starting with one of the concerns that was originally presented because certain resources were eliminated early in the process. So all committee members didn't have the opportunity to review and provide input on those resources. So a couple of things that we did to adjust that. One, ensuring that every committee member reviewed all resources. So nothing was eliminated from review and input and feedback. The second thing that we did, and it was on one of the handouts that we provided in the folder, first we created a whole separate instructional materials review process for anything that required CHEEK review. So the process for any resource that needs to go through CHEEK has a very different process and procedure from resources that we would review for any other content area. The third thing that we did is we moved the open public review and the teacher review committee to the beginning of the process. So instead of it happening at closer to the end, I think around maybe step 8 or 9, I don't have the steps in front of me right now, it happened like steps 3 and 4 in the process. So that was moved up to allow community input from the very beginning, that open public review and teacher review committee, and for all of that data to be shared with each committee as they're reviewing. So they got to see the results and have that input and feedback to help inform their decisions.
Thank you for that. So our IRRC group, as well as our CHEAT group, was able to review the feedback from the teacher group of 12 people, as well as the responses from the about 500 or so community members, which is less than 1% of our stakeholders. So I appreciate that the district revisited the process, that you implemented feedback that you received to put a process in place that was more reflective of what board members expressed they would have liked to have seen. So I do appreciate that you all have taken the time to respond to the feedback that you received from the previous board, to revisit the process. I, being a parent of 2 students in the school system, also just want to uplift the level of communication that you all provide to parents. You mentioned the LORS curriculum. I remember getting letters about that ongoingly to let me know as a parent, this is going to be offered. You have the opportunity to opt out or not. So I really want to uplift the appreciation for the options that you all provide our parents. You have the option to opt out. We're providing an option to provide your student with a abstinence-only curriculum or comprehensive curriculum. And what I hear is that the district considered how you can customize to meet the needs of stakeholders, which as a parent, I appreciate that. You're customizing the curriculum and giving me choice. I also hear that the district has been mindful of the financial responsibility. So I appreciate that you all put forth the work and the expertise to present us with the information that you've presented today, and just want to continue to uplift that I look to you all as the school district to evaluate the curriculum and engage our community in the evaluation of curriculum and make recommendations as you have. And so I appreciate all the work that went into the presentation today. And with that, Dr. Therese, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I appreciate this presentation, also, and all the work you all have been doing for the past few years related to sex education. And this is certainly an important topic. It's also very timely. I've been actually exploring the Epstein files and also connecting the need for our children so young to really be aware around their bodies and naming body parts and understanding coercion and understanding consent and understanding no and what that looks like when there is exploitation. I am in support of comprehensive sex education for a variety of reasons. I have some data I'd like to share, in particular around Gwinnett County. So in Gwinnett County, we have 15 to 17-year-olds where there are 7 pregnancies per 1,000 youth in Gwinnett County. We also have 12% of those teen mothers with a second birth, teenagers. We also have, in terms of STDs, 17 cases per 1,000 young people, ages 15 to 24. And that number also accounts for half of the new STDs in Gwinnett County. We also have where there are 100 adolescents are exploited every night around sex trafficking or human trafficking. So when I think about this data and the importance of sex education, when we teach our children comprehensively, and in your slide, if you can look at slide number 3, comprehensive sex education cultivates the skills necessary for effective communication, responsible decision-making, and the ability to navigate relationships in a healthy and respectful manner. This is so very important that abstinence education cannot touch. Our children need this education. And it should be default for our children. And I also respect the opportunity for parent choice. If they don't want their child to participate, then that's their option. But the default should certainly be comprehensive because of the need for this. I also have been personally, a personal story around someone I know who was pregnant at a very young age because of families working, very, very busy, did not teach their child around body and sex and what that looks like, condoms, STDs. This person was pregnant at 11 years old. And this is, among many examples, this is one example of how sex education would have really helped prevent this child in understanding that how it can happen. Sometimes parents don't, and it's no fault on the parent. I'm saying, because I don't want to also say that parents have to, but it's important for the kids to understand what that looks like, and engaging in certain behaviors can also lead to pregnancy and how they need to be safe. We want to prevent pregnancies for our children, and we also want to prevent STDs. We also want to prevent human trafficking. We know that Gwinnett County is one of the hubs in particular around human trafficking. And so when we think about prevention and protection, comprehensive education is the only way that we can address that, not sex education. The other thing I want to name is the children understanding saying no and reporting, consent, recognizing grooming, trafficking awareness, naming body parts, safe and unsafe touch, body safety. These are things that if our children don't know, again, these numbers will continue to increase that I named earlier around our children having teen pregnancies, STDs, as well as exploitation around human trafficking. So I appreciate the work that you all have done, engaging our students in the process and their voices around sex education, and also providing the opportunity for parents, if they want to choose to opt out, they can, but certainly having comprehensive education as the default is really critical for our youth. Thank you.
Dr. Therese, I've got a couple more comments. One of them is around the data. Just to remind you, before we adopted Choosing the Best, the pregnancy rate in Gwinnett County was 30 per thousand. 30 per thousand before Choosing the Best. It's now 7, as you mentioned. But that's a 77% decrease over the time we've implemented and employed and used Choosing the Best. The other thing is all the things you were mentioning, especially around human trafficking and exploitation, all of that is included in Choosing the Best. And the last question that I would have, which I think really is why the state probably asks us to include sex education in our health, and I do want to correct Chief West. The main reason that we came back through this again was because the first time you tried to pass sex ed, it was part of the overall health curriculum, and you removed Choosing the Best, the program we'd used for sex ed for 20 years, and didn't allow us because it didn't teach all of this health curriculum. So if you remember, Dr. Simmons, we had the overall view of health that we were to approve, and we approved Health Smart for the bulk of health teaching, right? Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's our current adopted resource.
Right. So we approved that, but because the sex ed curriculum was not broadly allowed to be looked at, that's when the board decided we needed a second look at the sex ed curriculum component. So that's why all of this is going through a second time, not because we specifically looked at sex ed the first time. It was because sex ed was just lumped in with all of our health education. And then the last thing is just, I think if you look at, again, exactly to Dr. Teresa's concern, Health Smart, the expectation is more often that teen sex is going to be an expected behavior. And if it's an expected behavior, and that's what you put forth, then you're going to have more at-risk consequences versus looking at sexual activity, delaying sexual activity, because the more and longer, and all of this is backed up by data, that you delay sexual activity, the better and your future opportunities are, the better your mental health is, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my concern in all of this, is that we continue to do everything that we can to help our students understand all the things you're talking about, Dr. Therese, but for the reason that they then delay, and again, like I mentioned, I mean, of course, it's actually in the United States, the youngest age of consent, legal age of consent in the entire United States is 16. So, and most of this is taught to 14-year-olds. So.
Can I ask you to share a bit more information on the, I know in our binder we have a page dedicated to the opt-out survey results. It specifies the percentage of students, and I don't know if this is students or parents, that chose comprehensive versus abstinence. Is that slide available, or can you talk us through who chose which program? Was it the student or was it the parent? And if you can talk us through the percentages, that would be helpful.
Thank you, ma'am, and yes, ma'am, I can definitely talk you through the percentages. So we had 1,443 elementary students participating in the pilot. Of those 1,443 elementary students, 38 families completed the survey choosing to opt out. That was about, that is 3% of the elementary families that completed the survey chose to opt out. It did get, there was the choice for abstinence versus comprehensive at the middle and high school level. Middle school, there was 1,606 students in the pilot. Of those 1,606 students, there were 361 completed surveys. Of the 361 completed surveys, 52 chose abstinence, 51 opted out entirely, and 258 selected comprehensive. And then lastly, at the high school level, there were 2,556 students participating in the pilot. 647 of them completed the survey. Of the 647 survey completers, 84 selected abstinence, 45 opted out entirely, and 518 selected comprehensive.
So that's interesting, and I don't know if you all have any analysis or conclusions that you might uplift there, but it's interesting that we had such a extraordinary amount of people that responded to the survey that chose the comprehensive pilot at both the middle and high school levels compared to those that chose abstinence. It's just interesting to me. So we had 258 families that chose comprehensive that provided some feedback to us compared to 52 that chose abstinence. So that's about, 5 times more people providing feedback. For high school, 518 families provided feedback that chose comprehensive, 84 families that chose abstinence. So here we're seeing 6 times more people providing feedback. So it's interesting. I don't know if you could provide any analysis or conclusions there, but we definitely see that we have more people engaged in providing feedback that chose the comprehensive materials, and I think that's something worth noting.
I would just say that, so this is the first time we've added in an opt-in option, and by far, this is the most responses we've received. Typically, it would just be the opt-out, and those numbers have always been fairly low. Of course, we have had the same program in place for a multitude of years. So I think we recognize that the more we can find ways to engage families, we can't tell what those ultimate results are going to be, but we need to continue with that Quality Plus improvement, finding different ways to engage families, because we can certainly lend ourselves to thinking, well, the majority chose comprehensive, but until we can get more families engaged, we won't know those answers. And I think just having these options for families, because ultimately it's their decision, is something that is a positive for our district that no other districts are currently doing in Georgia.
Thank you, Dr. Valentine, Dr. Guadalupe, and Mr. Chase for your presentation.
Dr.
We will
Treese.
now move forward to
Dr.
our
Treese,
next.
I have just a quick question, just a really data question. For other districts that have deployed ETR Health Smart, have we grabbed any of their data, historical data, to kind of see any trends as to how the implementation has impacted students, impacted data, impacted anything that I've talked about, that other board members have talked about in terms of either, I don't know, STD rates, in terms of what Dr. Treese talked about, any sort of that information? Is it out there? Have we looked at that? I'm just curious.
We have not currently looked at any data around that. I'm also not aware of any data that exists with our current program that's been reviewed, or I've heard a lot about a study that they're, looking at pregnancy rates and choosing the best. I know, Mr. Knudsen, you've spoken a lot about that. I have not seen a particular study, or I'm not aware of a study yet that exists where we've actually looked at Gwinnett County school students and who's engaged in that curriculum, but I would love to review that if that's out there.
Thank you.
I would add that Doherty County just switched to choosing the best, so that's a data point from HealthSmart. And then I would also add that choosing the best is the only evidence-based curriculum that's actually had research done on an aggregate level showing that it has positive results for risk reduction, risky behavioral reduction. No other sex ed curriculum has a research-based study to show that. So the data's there.
Thank you all. I think now it's time for us to move on to the next item of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you to Chief West and team members. We will now have George Gomez, Chief of Staff, and Dr. David Goldie, Legislative and Policy Administrator, provide a legislative and policy update. Dr. Goldie.
Good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Treese, board members, and Dr. Taylor. So we will begin with looking at a policy update. So we provided a packet on your desk that has policy BAAB on the top. So if you want to pull that packet apart, and we'll work our way through that packet. So we bring as old business policy BAAB, academic accountability. As you recall, we brought this policy to the board in December to lay on the table for 30 days. Following some feedback and recommendations from Ms. Stone, staff has worked to revise metrics set out in the evaluation table. Those revisions were not quite finalized in time for the January board meeting, so staff recommended that the policy remain on the table for a further 30 days. So now we bring that policy to you today with a recommendation for board approval. You will see in that packet, you have the two policies that we're looking at this evening, plus another document that has feedback, and that's there's some feedback there from a constituent on BAAB. So I'll pause there for questions or comments with regards to BAAB. If you look at the evaluation table, if you look at the third column, RBES and WSA criteria, if you look down that column, you'll see there is more quantitative elements that have been placed in there with regards to evaluation. So those are really the only changes from the policy that was brought in December. So that third column.
While board members are reviewing, if you don't mind, can you share why we are reviewing this policy again and updating it?
Yes, I believe the original language was, it talked about, let me just pull up the table.
And
So-
my understanding is that it was more around like alignment around our current processes and how we are.
It is, it's designed for that, but some of the language was not quantitative enough. It talked about some elements, many elements, or most. So the idea was to clean up that language so it was more specific.
And in my opinion, the specificity also allows for greater accountability. And I
Absolutely.
think that's the power of policy. So I do appreciate that. But I also know that part of the update around this policy in particular is really codifying existing processes that are
Absolutely.
happening and documenting that here and making those updates. So thank you.
Okay. With your permission, I'll move on to IDDG. So as new business, we bring you policy IDDG, multilingual learners. So this new policy was presented to the board in November and laid on the table for 30 days. At the December meeting, the policy was presented for approval on the understanding that district staff would provide a more expansive and higher quality data set early in the new year. That new data set is now in this revised document. And if you look towards page 5, you will see a more expansive and higher quality data set to replace the data set that was posted on page 6. And I believe, Dr. Therese, you provided some feedback on this, and that's also in the document there. So we're recommending this to be laid on the table for 30 days, this new data set. So again, I'll just pause briefly for any comments or questions. So this is the document we sent to the board early last week. Okay.
Again, this is, these two policies will be laid on the table for 30, I'm
So,
sorry, one
yeah.
of them, I apologize.
Yes.
The MLL policy will be laid on the table, and the policy BAAB, academic accountability, is going to be up for a vote tomorrow.
Recommended for approval,
And then,
yes.
and then the updates that we have to policy IDDG will be on the table for 30 days.
That
And
is
mainly, the
correct.
updates were really, as you can see, we passed this already previously, and the updates are really around the data reporting, which I think is also, again, another value add around the power of policy and accountability. So I do appreciate how you all have done that.
Thank you, Dr.
And we do
Therese.
encourage our community members and our board to continue to provide feedback as they prefer, and just really appreciate the work you've done. Board members, any questions, comments? If not, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Right. I would just like to point out, within that policy packet, there are 2 draft policy proposals, which I believe is going to be part of the governance team discussion after this presentation. So they're just hard copies of those 2 policies so that you have something to refer to. So with your permission, I'll move on to the legislative update.
Quick question.
Absolutely, yes.
When are these policies being loaded up on the website for community review? The multilingual learners?
That will be done, typically it's after the board meeting, so
Okay.
when the board
Yep.
approves the laying on the
The laying on
table,
the table,
done the
okay.
official approval, then it's typically the next day, it's the Friday
Perfect.
morning, that it will be posted for community feedback.
Thank you.
Okay? No
I have a
problem.
question as well regarding the AAB,
Yes.
the table that's now, that you were just referring to. Just want to make sure that I'm clear in reading it. On the section empowered support, it appears that there is no system response for empowered support or flexible support. Is that correct? Am I reading that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
So there isn't necessarily a specific assignment of support. Like all schools receive like support from their CSTs, but in terms of some of the more targeted support from from Teaching and Learning Division, for example, we support those schools as requested, just because of the capacity of our district team to be able to push out into all schools and provide support in the same way. There's a lot of consistent things that happen in regards to PD, training opportunities, principal level meetings, in addition to support from their cluster superintendents. That's ongoing. So if your question is, should we tease some of those components out, in that it's variable, so that's why it wasn't listed specifically.
And I guess on the opposite end, for our managed support and structured support schools, the response is exactly the same. So is it in the intentionality to be, I guess, vague here? Because I'm surprised that the response is exactly the same for both of those categories of schools.
The list of interventions for the level 4 and 5 schools, the structured and the managed, broadly, to your point, seem vague, but within the school support plans, there's a differentiation typically in quantity and duration of supports. So for instance, and many of them, Dr. Simmons, are very school-specific and data-driven. So what CST intervention or TNL support looks like at middle school A, that's a level 4 school, and middle school B, that's a level 4 school as well, might look very different because their data indicates that this school is progressing well in language arts but not in math, and this one in math but not language arts. So when we get to those level 4 and 5 schools, you see some broad terminology there, but the detailed plans, those school support plans, which are co-developed amongst TNL, the school principal, and SIO, that's really where you see the different delineation of supports.
I guess for me, what is a bit perplexing here is if I'm using this as an accountability tool, I don't see how I'm holding accountable our empowered, not our empowered schools. How are we holding accountable our structured support schools differently from our managed support schools? Because based upon what's reflected here, there's no differentiation happening in the support that they're receiving.
Yeah, and that might be something we can tease out differently in the vocabulary that you're kind of reviewing there, because they are, to your point, the same. But where you really see the delineation between the two would be in those school support plans. So perhaps we could provide some reference to the individualized school support plans in policy. That's something that we could tease out, but that's where you'd see the differentiation.
I just want to elevate my concern around our schools that are performing at the lowest levels. I have a concern that maybe they're not receiving the level of support that they need to be successful. We have quite a few schools that continue to perform at the lowest levels in the district that have been performing at lower levels for years. And when I look at this policy and I think about the level of support they're receiving, it's not clear to me how they're being assisted and supported in a way that's going to help them to be successful, especially now that it looks like the level of support they receive is no different from the category directly above them. I would like to be reassured that the district is very intentional and strategic in providing them with differentiated support so that they can be successful. We have our promise schools that are on the list, including, they're being included among the lowest performing 25% of the schools in the state. We have a number of schools on that list that have remained on that list from last year that I'm still not really clear about how is their support differentiated from some other schools that are not on that list. And so I just want to be reassured that the district is actively thinking about how to differentiate that support so that the schools that are appearing to be most in need are really receiving some equitable services and resources and not equal services and resources, but equitable, to make sure that their students are able to achieve and reach their full potential.
And I would say both and, equal and equitable. And I also know that when we had our RBES review, there were clear differentiations around interventions. And I think what Dr. Simmons is asking for is, I understood that in our recent meetings with RBES that there was going to be more intentional focus on the promise schools, and that you all were working on that as a different level of service. And if I'm not mistaken, there's been presentations around what that looks like. I think what Dr. Simmons is asking for is it to be more clearly defined in here, and I support that because it would really help to understand what you already have committed to, and really putting it on paper around what you've already committed to. Because if I'm not mistaken, I do recall differentiated interventions around our our at-promise schools. So I think supporting Dr. Simmons' comment around documenting it would certainly be helpful.
No, and I appreciate that. The support is distinctly differentiated from level 4 to 5. To your point, Dr. Simmons, it can be more clearly outlined in the document in front of you, though. We can tease that out.
I'm wondering if perhaps we can explore maybe developing a procedure, a company procedure for this one to go in a little bit more detail. We're going to be limited in terms of what can fit into that particular chart in the policy, but maybe a procedure allows a little bit more space to outline specifically by level what differentiation looks like.
Well,
So maybe you're saying this is not the document for it, but I would like to be able to speak to constituents and stakeholders around how schools are
Yeah.
being supported at varying levels based upon their performance levels. And currently, there is not a document that I can go to support that conversation. I know when we had our RBES meetings, I did, uplift this idea of, is there some type of district effort around supporting turnaround schools? Are we visiting other districts to see what they're doing to support with turnaround schools? There is no document that I'm aware of that I can utilize and reference to speak to the community about how we're supporting our students performing at the lowest levels. And so that's what I'm asking for. When I look at this policy, I'm not seeing it here either. And as you know, we use policies to hold accountable. So when there's a lack of even information here, it to me is conveying that we're not able to hold accountable. And I want to make sure that my schools, my principals, students are being supported so that they can be successful. And so that's what I'm asking for, is more transparency around the intentionality and the strategy that's being employed to support those schools that need additional resources, equitable resources.
There should be something that we can go to, because we've had a presentation on this where we went from 66 schools that were receiving support. 28 of those schools moved up to the third level, so therefore the resources that we committed to helping schools improve, instead of being allocated to 66 schools, are now allocated to 38 schools, which is an equitable approach. We have those documents. We've had the presentation. I'm not sure where, you remember that, Therese? Dr. Therese? We got an update on that recently. And, I have this curse of remembering numbers pretty well. But if you check that out, I think you're going to find it. And it was presented to us in a document. So the document's there. Now, how you're deploying all of those resources to those 38 schools, Chief Nebel, is obviously, to your point, going to vary depending on where they need the help. What are those specific areas? But we have to have somewhere be able to reference the implementation of this policy, which is to provide supports where most needed, and in this case to 38 schools, whereas a year ago it was to 66 schools. that exists somewhere.
Yeah, we've had the presentations, we've talked about it, but I think what Dr. Simmons is asking for is because of the work around policy and having it in a policy does help us as boards and how we operate as boards. When it's just added here, we've had the presentations, we have the data, I know it's there. Y'all, when we had our RBS, most of the at-promise schools are literally in District 5, and we've had really robust conversations around that in the meeting that I was in particular, which I was very helpful, talking about those interventions and commitments that you all will be making. I think it is what Dr. Simmons is asking for is all of the things that we've talked about and the presentations you all have done and the documents is including it in the policy to really allow more clarity for our board members to be able to really communicate. And also, this is the level of which we work is policy. So I support that.
Okay. All right. And should we move on to the legislative update? Yes. Okay, so the second packet that you have is a legislative update. There's a cover sheet that lets you know some of the bills that are moving. A couple of highlights at the top. Today is day 20. Crossover day is in 2.5 weeks' time, 2 weeks on Friday. The House has passed the amended FY26 budget, which fully funds QBE through the rest of the year. They did agree with the governor's proposal for a one-time 2,000 salary supplement. And there are line items for school nurses, bus drivers as well, custodians and nutrition workers. The Senate Appropriations Committee today, though, dropped that 2,000 supplement down to 1,250. So that will still have to pass the Senate. And then at some point, the House and the Senate will get together and come up with an agreed number. The bills
Is that funded? Is that funded? They're funding it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The bills that you see there are the ones that are moving with. You'll notice that some of them are in red. Now, those are the more impactful financial bills, and you'll find greater details on them on the second sheet. The top two, I know we've kept the board fully informed on all the actions on Senate Bill 382 and House Bill 1116. The three in that top set that follows them, the House Bill 1101, 1105, and 1145, that's three different senior homestead exemptions that are currently sitting in House Ways and Means Committee, while that committee works on House Bill 1116. So we will keep you updated on how those bills progress. That second sheet, potential high impact bills, you will see it gives the process for each bill, some of the content of the bill, and in red you'll see potential impacts. So our role, Dr. Taylor, has authorized that we share this with as many legislators as possible. We're going to focus on the delegation. We're certainly going to focus on the Ways and Means. Chairman Blackman, he has been very willing and open to meeting with all groups. He's met with ACCG, GMA with regards to the switch from property tax to sales tax. He met with our chief financial officer, along with the CFOs from Fulton, Cobb, and Cherokee. And that work is ongoing through the session. The two documents at the end of the packet, there's one on QBE reform and one on pre-K and early learning legislation. Chairwoman Dr. Therese did a lot of research and provided some information here. We've aligned it with board legislative priorities. There are some exemplars of other bills in other states that meet those priorities. And we've also added legislators that we think we've identified would have an interest in supporting those bills. So with the board's approval, we'd like to share that information with the delegation, but also approach legislators on that list in order to try to generate some kind of partnership and work with them on pushing these priorities. Yeah, so really we're providing the resources, exemplars of legislation, with the request that we'd be willing to partner with them in pushing some of that legislation through.
So our school system lobbying to help support pre-K early learning legislation as well as QBE reform. And then also communicating the high impact bills and related to, in particular, most of these looks like they are financial
Yes.
impacts that negatively impact our school system
Yes.
based on these bills. So I certainly support continuing to communicate with our legislators the impacts
Yeah.
of these bills,
Yeah.
because often, and I know Mr. Knitzen talks about this frequently around unfunded mandates, and I do think that often when we have mandates, that they do need to come with
Yes.
funding, in particular when we have such a huge surplus,
And
billion-dollar surplus in our
And this document will be very helpful because legislators look at bills in isolation and they see that impact.
Right.
What they don't see is the other 6 or 7, which also adds to the impact. So this is a way of sharing this with them so that they have a much broader understanding of what's going on with funding.
Also want to uplift your response to the board in terms of your reporting on the legislative duty activities that you are doing. And I think it's very helpful, and it allows our board members to also have more transparency and clarity around what's happening, and even for us to be able to provide feedback. There is a column for board comments and feedback, so I do encourage the board members to provide comment and feedback via email to our system around any bills or any questions of concern. We can certainly do that before our meetings to
Yes.
really discuss and go through some of the details that you've provided. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
David, you're a legislative rock star. Thank you
Well,
for
that's-
all this information,
Yeah.
for all the detail, for having it timely delivered to us, for having it front and centered, for the color coding. It's extremely helpful. I may not always respond to your emails,
No, that's
but I
okay.
do see them, I do read them.
Yeah.
They're extremely helpful, and it allows us to understand how you navigate the process. I know you're down there working hard and working with our delegation as well, to put all of this in perspective as to how, obviously they're trying to do great work at a very high level, but to be able to do what you do to show what it does kind of on a more granular level and how it impacts, students, our community, the work that we do here as well. Whether good or bad, I mean, we want to show it all as well. That's extremely helpful. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
I'd like to circle back to the MLL policy. I do have a couple of discussion points. This is being put on the table for 30 days, correct? Okay.
That's the request, the recommendation, yes.
My first inquiry is around the data reporting. I noticed that we initially included a biannual data report that has been eliminated. Can you share some insight as to why the biannual data report is no longer in place here?
Yes. Yes, I believe Dr. Durrance will be able to answer that question for you.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Simmons.
Debbie Durrance.
I'm
Debbie
over
Durrance,
here.
sorry,
I'm
yes,
so
yes,
sorry,
yes.
Dr. Simmons.
Yeah.
The reason that we didn't specify when that reporting would occur is because many of these data points are only available once annually. And so for those that might be available at another rhythm, whether it's biannual or at some other regular cadence, those could be provided, but many of the data elements only change once annually. And so that's why the group that came together made that adjustment in the current language.
Okay, I guess my initial understanding of how it was written is that we would receive reports twice a year to include the information that was available to be reported. I just want to be clear in that we're not, with the changes, is the intent that we're not receiving information as frequently. I want to be clear about that, because initially, the way it read to me is that we would receive information twice a year around our multilingual learner. program status, and now it appears we'll just receive it once a year. It seems as though the frequency has been reduced, but I just wanted to get some clarification there.
No, I appreciate the question. I think that we didn't specify that in this current suggested language, and we can certainly go back and perhaps review those items that might change, and we could provide to you on a more regular basis, such as twice a year. Most of the items, such as standardized assessment performance or exit rates from the program, are determined once annually. And so if those were reported to the board twice annually, you would see the same data at each of those points. And so we were trying to give flexibility within the policy that when data might be available, we could provide that more frequently, but not to provide the board with data that might not be updated because we only receive it once a year.
Okay, I follow you there. I also noticed that there was removal of the district establishing 2 to 3 long-term measurable goals for academic progress of ML students, which for me as a board member, it seemed that those goals would be pertinent in helping us to keep track of how our students are performing and prioritizing what maybe measures we're monitoring to understand how our students are doing throughout the year. Can you share why the district decided to remove that portion of the policy?
So the reason that that wording was adjusted within this policy was because we believe that that language was probably included in other policies that looked at data reporting and accountability for the district overall. And so we wanted to make sure that there was alignment in the goal-setting processes for the district as a whole, so that this one wouldn't be out of alignment. But we can certainly review to make sure that if that language were to be added back in, that it would just match the language as listed in some of the other policies that look at accountability for the district.
Being one of 5, I just want to uplift this sentiment of us maybe removing some of the rigor from this policy that was in there initially. So one being the change from a biannual report to an annual report, and then 2, removing the idea of us having established some measurable goals for this specific group of students. I do feel that we're maybe removing some of the rigor that was intended, some of the fervor that was initially intended with this policy, which for me is a bit problematic, but again, I recognize I'm only one of 5 board members. I also noted that we included initially that we would receive quality ratings on the professional development experiences. That was also removed. So I just question why we're removing some of these data points that were initially included that will help us to get a sense of the quality of the supports and help us to monitor student achievement ongoingly.
I provided an email with some feedback on the things that were removed. If y'all can just refer to some of the feedback that I shared, that would be greatly appreciated. I know we have 30 days on the table for this, and just refer back to that. That would be helpful. I listed the comments that Dr. Simmons said in an email as well, so if you could just review that, that would be great. I do support it, and that has been communicated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goldie. Now we'll take time. Actually, looking at the clock, I know that you all have some things that you wanted to discuss. If you have questions about the business meeting, any agenda items, we can do that off. We have until tomorrow to be able to get that response back to you. Did want to bring your attention to the anticipated presentations on the work session for March. We have one charter school petition update that we need to bring. We are scheduled to do the discipline update. And also for your calendars, the first budget work session will take place the next day at the business meeting at 5 o'clock. After that, we'll go into executive session, and then the formal business meeting will start at 7. So those are just my updates. Dr. Teresa, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. All right, board members, thank you, Dr. Taylor. I want to turn our attention to the two policies referenced by Dr. Goldie, the superintendent evaluation and the safe zones policy. The superintendent evaluation, you all have had conversations with, I'm sure by now, all of our board members have had conversations with Mr. Cleveland around providing feedback on the superintendent evaluation, and this is slated to be on the table for 30 days for more board feedback, of course, and for community feedback as well. So communities, members can and certainly provide more edits and comments around this, as well as our board. Any comments, any suggestions, anything there with this one? So next, I want to open up the conversation
Dr.
around.
Reed, just let me make sure I heard you correct.
Yes.
You want staff to bring this to the March board meeting to lay on the table for 30 days?
February board meeting. This is for tomorrow. This is for us to vote on tomorrow. The superintendent evaluation policy is on the agenda for tomorrow for 30 days, to lay on the table for 30 days.
Got it. Thank you.
For community feedback, and board members can continue to provide feedback as they need as well.
Thank you.
For 30 days.
Thank you.
I do have a preference to that. I think it is another opportunity to engage community members, and also for board members to keep looking and reviewing policies,
I thought I
because
heard you
things.
wrong, so no problem.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so the next conversation is around safe zones. I want to open the conversation here. This is also suggested to be on the table for 30 days for tomorrow, for us to vote for it to be on the table for 30 days, again, for more community feedback and for board feedback. But this is here a suggestion, and if there's anyone, we can open the floor around conversations here. While you are reviewing, I also want to share that I'm going to be continuing, as I have my meetings with Dr. Taylor, sharing the communications with our board members. I think it's really important to make sure that there's transparency around my communications and my meetings with Dr. Taylor, and I really want the board members to also have an opportunity to know what we're talking about and to provide any questions, any feedback, any suggestions. If there's clarifications that need to be made, I also open it for our system to make those clarifications, and for our board members to also ask questions and get clarifications. Certainly, I want to make sure that the communications are transparent, that they're honest, there's no misrepresentation around data or information. I want to be as open as possible around these discussions, and also in partnership with the vice chair as well with our briefings with the system. I think that's also going to be helpful with just making sure we're leading in a way where our board members have voice, and if they have questions, they can certainly ask the questions for clarification, and I think that's important. So I do want to just share that I'm committed to that, and anything that may need more clarification, I'm open to feedback, questions, and even input from our school system to help support the clarifications that are needed. I do appreciate my conversations this week, Knudsen and Gasper, and look forward to continuously one-on-one conversations to make sure there is clarity around communications that are being sent, because I do think it's important that it's not just one board member. I'm one person. Just because I am chair, it doesn't mean that my one have any more power than anyone else. It's just managing the meetings, but really we all have the equal voice and equal vote, so I just want to uplift that.
Can I ask a question around this policy JBCF?
The safe zones?
Yeah, where
Okay.
where did this come from? Was it developed by the district? Was it suggested by, what, I mean, we have a policy committee. I don't remember hearing that this graced the walls, meeting space of the policy committee. I'm just wondering where this came from.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one is a couple of responses there. One is the Safe Zones policy is a templated policy that was sent from the National Education Association, where it's a best practice that they're suggesting for many school systems to use to ensure that schools create a safe space for students, in particular in response to the current environment and climate, where students and their families are experiencing a lot of fear around their safety and their need for supports. And so the National Education Association shared this, and then I sent it to our school system. I sent a link to the NEA policy to provide it to our school system to use to review. I also sent some additional suggestions, particularly around the birthright citizenship, and that was something that came from some community members. And this is, again, an opportunity for us to use this template and for you all, board members, to review, and also community members to provide more comment. And I'm hopeful that we can get more student voice in this policy and commenting on it when it lays on the table for 30 days, get more families and teachers to also provide comments, and even our counselors. I think that's the advantage, because I think we need more feedback on this, honestly, I think. So I'm committed to ensuring that we can get more, in particular, more student voice in this.
Are you referring to the same NEA that called our colleague, Mr. Gasper, and his friends domestic terrorists in 2021? Are you referring to the same NEA that our Georgia School Board Association pulled out of membership around that time and joined another national organization? I'm not sure the NEA is the place I'm going first and foremost for policy, but I also want to just raise the idea that it looks very redundant, and I don't understand the implementation. So I won't be able to support putting this on the table for 30 days. I don't think that's the next right step. I think the next right step is to truly have some input from the district, who has to figure out how to implement this, to talk to building leaders. And again, for almost every bullet point that's listed here, we already deal with these issues in many of our other policies that are already in place. So I, instead of adding another policy, would rather get an update from the district in terms of where we might, if we need to, strengthen some of these other policies. Because I think the impetus right now is around a question that we can't even ask legally. So in terms of immigration, legal or illegal, et cetera, I mean, we educate kids that come to our schools with the right information, address, age, and I verified with Mr. Pereira. I mean, it's literally against the law for us to ask for that information from a student, right? So I would rather not find ways to highlight people who are potentially in that and still, showing the fortitude to continue their education in our schools. I'd rather see if we could find some ways to, again, I want system feedback before I just throw this on the table to be voted on 30 days from now.
So my comment here is, you had another question, and I wanted to answer that as well, Mr. Knudsen, around the policy committee. We're going to have training this weekend to go over things that there are best practices around what goes through the policy committee, and many of those elements are considered around timing, as well as whether it's governance related or not. If it's governance related, that's board work, that's policy work that we do as a governance team versus going through the policy committee. I certainly support the use of our policy committee, which are community members that each of us appointed to this committee from our various districts. And I support certainly the calendar that they've already created for the year. And the calendar is already set for some of the items that they prioritized based on the conversations that they've had as a team. So I just wanted to answer that question because I remembered that was one of their questions there. But then my other comment around the safe zones is we are undoubtedly in a time where there is fear around children attending schools. We've seen across the nation children being afraid to go into schools and high absenteeism from, in particular, families and children who have immigrant families having fear around attending schools. We've seen it where students have ran at the bus stop away from ICE agents and the trauma associated with ICE activity in their communities, nearby their schools, their playgrounds, different facilities that are associated or near our schools. And the Safe Zones policy helps to support creating a safe space for our children, not just physically, but emotionally. And the hope is that it would improve absenteeism, and it will also indicate our strong support for our students, their psychological safety. And many of them are suffering from just the terror, and also just the physical safety. I know we have a letter that already includes language from the NEA. The letter we have provided guidance to our principals that has the exact language or summarized language from the NEA policy to support our students and their safety. This is a suggestion around codifying that letter in a policy and allowing for feedback from community members in our board. And there is also a facility that is being, it's almost done, an ICE facility, ICE detention facility, that many of our community members are afraid of. Gwinnett County is one of the most diverse counties in the nation, and I know there's this saying around, well, why call attention to it? They already know. They're here. The ICE facility is built very near here. There's a reason why it's being built here. It was selected to be built here. We want to make sure that our children know that they are safe and know that they belong, and we can do everything we can in our power to do that, to support their needs, psychological safety as well as physical safety.
Can we hear from the district around implications of the proposed policy? Any thoughts, concerns, feedback? Because this is a new policy. We haven't discussed this previously, so I would like to hear from the district on this proposed policy.
Yeah, so I think we were able to initially, when we got a copy of this, if you remember, I sent an email. We were able to work with the one or two division or departments within divisions that would take point in implementing the policy, or maybe a way, as you said, operationalizing the policy. I sent that feedback to you, and there were certain concerns surrounding, bear with me here.
While you're looking at that, can you also share Dr. Stone's questions and also my comments as well? Ms. Stone.
Yes, there was a lot of feedback going back and forth, and, so if you remember, some of you did it blue, green, red. It's all here, so it's not as easy. But there was feedback about who the capacity of the counselors, ability to take on one more task, specifically in counseling students with fear. I always remind us that we don't do clinical counseling, that our counselors don't do one-to-one therapy, that they do either a group format, where sometimes they can establish a group, or they send out information to the families so the families can have some clinical connections. We do have some resources that we're using now under some of the mental health grants that may be more aligned to that thought of a one-to-one therapeutic environment. But as a whole, we, our counselors, don't provide therapy. Does that make sense? The other couple of concerns was the cost associated with the training, the types of training that were requested. So our operational or our capacity to implement that section in the policy that talks about training and compliance, that was the original feedback that was received, right? There are different ways to approach this. One of the feedback began with some context that I thought was very good to read, and that was the context that basically stated how we currently enroll students. Again, we enroll students based on the information they provide. A student to be enrolled simply has to establish residency in the county. In establishing residency in the county, we don't request any immigration information. The privacy rules, which are governed by FERPA, have been in place since I've been an educator. So there are many ways to deal with a policy. One way is to have a standalone policy. One way is to ingrain some of this into a policy, to another policy. While this is the model, and we were waiting for a decision to whether it's going to be on the table or not, my next step was to take this and frame it a little different for consideration, right? And take a look at what links are already out there for your consideration. But the main concern that came back, and I know I'm repeating myself, came about operationalizing that compliance and training component.
And I know we've had some questions, and I also kind of did my own research, and asked around related to how our school system or our teachers and counselors can support our students. And essentially, the feedback I received was that they are already supporting children who are dealing with fear around ICE immigration issues. And so they're working through it the best way they can. They would appreciate guidance around that. Some of the suggestions was doing a train-the-trainer model that might help reduce costs to help provide guidance to teachers and counselors if a student comes in or have chronic absenteeism. They can reach out and figure out what's going on, but really providing the supports that are necessary and having guidance around that. Another perspective I received was the core issues that some of the students are experiencing may be trauma. That is something that our counselors navigate through, and they deal with, and they refer out, and they kind of work through that currently already. It could be bereavement, loss of a family member, or issues that's related to, family separation. Those are issues that they're already dealing with and they work with. Whether it's in small groups or individual, that's already happening. I think the guidance is not just about ICE, but these are some common core concerns that they're already dealing with and working with the students, but there is a need for more guidance. And the letter is a letter that you already sent out that provided guidance around what to do, but I think their request is kind of understanding more around how to engage students specifically in a legal way, in a way that supports their needs, what is the guidance and best practice around that, and they're willing. Again, this is a small subset, just trying to understand, but.
So we can always retweak the language. I think the staff was reacting to the language that was currently in the model, which called for an annual staff training. So when you have that would be like what we do with our annual training on suicide awareness. We already have about 3-4 hours of every year. Everybody has to receive this annual training. So some of the concerns was about, doesn't mean we can't tweak the language there or find a more better way, but the staff was reacting to the model as it is. And again, the concern with the model as it is basically operationalizing that component of training and compliance, right? Most of the other part of the policy are things that we're already doing or not doing. In other words, we're not asking for immigration data. So the rest of the policy is already in alignment with the work that we're doing. It was just that section.
Mr. Gomez, thank you so much for that insight. I would like to ask, because I printed it out, received your email with the safety zones policy draft, as well as the procedures, as well as the justification and education. Is there a way that we can provide a paper copy for the full board? Because what we've been provided is just a safety zones policy. We don't have a copy. The copy that I have of the procedures is what I printed from my email.
So the procedure is not something that we developed. That procedure was attached to that. So the district has not developed a procedure. I think that Dr. Therese had provided that as a possible example for consideration. But if the policy is passed and we have to operationalize a procedure, we may or may not go to that model. We would have to operationalize this policy in our procedures. So all that information that you received digitally came from, I want to say Dr. Therese has sent that out as possible exemplars. But that wasn't worked on by the district.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important for us to still all have a paper copy of it because it outlines and aligns with the policy that we have in front of us and strategically how it would be implemented.
Okay.
All right, thank you. My last thing I want to say, I don't know if this is the time where we go in and talk about our edits and annotations, but I had the opportunity to meet with some of our school leaders in District 1 and really appreciate their hard work. They sent me a ton of documents, and I have some edits for the policy, and I can send them over on email with the board. But again, I don't know how much time we have. It's 8:02.
Yeah, I think that's the value of us giving direction to the system, is it being a decision that the board needs to make around, are we going to lay it on the table or not? And if we are going to lay it on the table, I think we can, of course, we can still add those edits and comments. And if it's not ready then it'll still be on the table. But I think it's just the opportunity to have it on the table, so then the system is directed to then develop more the policies, edit the policies, the procedures, and for additional community feedback and board feedback.
Okay, perfect. Well, I support laying it on the table.
I do too. Thank you. There are no.
I'm just I'm still wondering if this policy is truly even necessary, and I kind of sit from the position that I, fully support the well-being of our students and, want truly nothing but the best for them. But I look at this policy and I look at it as somewhat of a regurgitation of a lot of policies that we already have in place. And then I look at the genesis of the structure of this policy coming from a far-left organization that promotes gender ideology, gender-affirming care, something that I personally can't support. So I think this policy needs to be looked at also through the lens of a legal perspective. And if we start labeling a policy such as with the words safe zones, are we getting ourselves into trouble? Are we protecting something we shouldn't be protecting? These are just things that are going through my mind, and I struggle with that. If we want to create a process and create instructions for our schools to help our teachers help our students, I think we can easily do that. I saw a wonderful email that Chief Nebo created around Ramadan that went out to all the principals, very detailed. I think we can certainly do that in this situation. Our teachers want to help. Our teachers want to do amazing things. And I think in this situation, trust me, I know the temperature is hot in our country. I know Homeland Security wants to build an ICE detention center in Gwinnett County. I know the temperature is hot. But I also know that our teachers love our students, and with a little direction, our teachers are going to do wonderful things. And I think building a policy to try to operationalize this process that could potentially create other issues down the road is where my head is going, could somewhat be problematic. And so I really am cautioned in moving forward at all with this policy for those reasons. Obviously, I'm one of 5. We still have to take a vote tomorrow night, but those are my comments and sentiments around that. This is kind of timely, coming around the anti-ICE protests that are happening around on our campuses in recent weeks, which I don't agree with either, although I'll be the first to tell you that I support the First Amendment and support the right to protest, but just not on our campus during school hours. This is, again, kind of timely, and I think it lays time to pause and reflect. Is this something that we really want to push forward with? So those are my thoughts.
I support putting a policy on the table for 30 days. I do want to uplift this idea of the therapy that's highlighted in the policy, and that schools will activate counseling and student support responses when students are impacted. That is one of the, I guess, implications that's top of mind for me, because that could be realized, especially with the building of development here in Gwinnett County. We could see the number of students impacted rise fairly quickly. So I am thinking about how much that could potentially cost us. I do want us to make sure that when we're considering this policy, we're thinking about the financial implications that come along with it, and what can our district actually support from a financial standpoint, as well as if we don't provide the one-on-one therapy, you're saying we don't do that currently, what might that workaround be? What would that wraparound service be? What would we do in place of providing that one-to-one therapy? I just want to make sure that we are not positioning ourselves in a way where we may incur an astronomical amount of expenses related to this that we weren't anticipating because of what could happen. None of us want it to happen, but it could. We don't know what some of the consequences might be with the development that's currently taking place and how many families could be impacted. I want us to be sure that what we pass in our policy is something that we can fully support, both now and in the future. So that's where my concern lies primarily.
And I know we have it's 8:08 now, but I do want to share that when we talk about belonging, we talk about safety, that we must do all we can to ensure that each and every child feels safe in our schools. And thinking about ways and how we can creatively engage community organizations like NAMI. I did send an email with some suggestions related to cost avoidance and how that can possibly be realized through community partnerships, through volunteers, through therapists who are certainly committed to helping to support children who are experiencing this, and how do we really leverage the talents and the expertise of community volunteers who have experience around dealing with traumas, bereavement, and things that may be specifically related to this. In terms of training, there are also some other things that I provided as suggestions to consider, but obviously this is suggestions to me to for us to consider, to do all we can and anything we can to make sure that we're meeting the needs of each and every child and make sure that our students, in particular community members in District 5, I've heard from many of them, and some of them have already been detained and returned to school. And principals and teachers are having to deal with students who've already been detained and families, and they returned. But there are some serious concerns around, how do we make sure that they too do feel like there's a safe space for them to be. And this is really important. This policy is really important for us to do that. And I also know that it needs to be successfully implemented. And hearing from you all is really important, because execution at the end of the day is important. And one of the things that I know, because of time, I wanted to talk about implementation policy later, and we can have other discussions around that. But there is, to me, a need for that to also include impacts around financial that can help us understand. But I would say we need to do all we can, and let's think about some creative ways on how we can do all we can to meet the needs of those kids.
So why
Any
wouldn't
other-
we
oh, I'm
take,
sorry.
yeah, just one last. So why wouldn't we take the time to get system input before we put it on the, I mean, we put something on the table and we come back, we get input, we change it, then we're going to put it on the, the reason you put something on the table is you're ready. I haven't heard any feedback from the system in terms of what my concerns are. So I'm not sure why we're throwing it on the table when they need the opportunity to respond. Implementation is key here. If we create something that can't be implemented, what does that say? If we create something that costs too much money and we get halfway, what does that say? I mean, we need I need system input and really their recommendation that this is how we're supposed to, because we already have safe schools. We already have those policies in place. Are we going to pass a new policy every time something happens at the federal level that we don't like or whatever? I mean, again, like I said, I think this is fairly redundant, but if there is a way to, I want the school district who has the responsibility of operationalizing this policy to weigh in before we go to the community, because we're asking for input from the community out of context, potentially, with what it's actually going to look like at the end of the day.
Many of the concepts that we are highlighting here in the policy is already included in the letter of guidance. Not all, but some of them are, because that's you all use the NEA for guidance around the letter that the school system was sent. Am I correct? Right?
You mean,
It was AAASA? AAASA, sorry. So AASA.
so may
That
I
letter.
offer maybe a possible compromise, just in that maybe if we agree, I'm asking, I'm not dictating, I'm asking, if we agree to lay on the table, could we work on it for a month and agree to lay it on the table in March? That gives us a little bit more time to go deeper into it and be able to provide you guys some more of the operational context around this. Just an idea. Doesn't mean anybody has to follow it, but just an idea.
I think because of the urgency of the matter, I would, and because we already have some guidance related to this work that you all already have sent to principals, I think that if you all can work on it, if it's laid on the table, then it gives us the opportunity to vote on it. However, if it's not ready, then it also gives us opportunity, which we've done before, to keep it on the table. We just recently did that with the MLL policy. I'm sorry, was it the MLL policy?
Yeah.
It was right, where we passed it, there were more edits, or we didn't vote on a policy because it wasn't ready, because the system was still figuring things out, and it wasn't ready. And we did not take action on it. So I think at least having it where it's still accessible for the system to work on, for board members to provide feedback, and the community to provide feedback, I think is a good medium. And if it's not ready by then, the board can certainly decide not to pass it and wait on it.
Can you help us understand the urgency behind this? I guess the speed that it needs to hit the policy Rolodex? I'm at a loss because we don't have the operationalized component of it. I still want to get a legal perspective. And I guess I'm not seeing where the speed is because we got to get it right. If
I
this
agree.
is what we want to do, we have to get it right. So is there an option to pump the brakes a little bit and say, hey, let's just hold on this. Let's let the district do the work that they need to do. There was a lot of good conversation, a lot of good dialogue, a lot of good questions. George is taking a lot of notes up there. I saw it. I know Mr. Perez is taking a lot of notes back there as well. Is there an option to pump the brakes a little bit and say, let's just hold on to this for maybe 30 days, let the district do their work, and then come back to the board during a work session and say, here's the data that we have. Here's what we how we can roll this out from an operational perspective, and then make a decision?
I see that as that's what we're doing, actually. So
You want to come to the board tomorrow night and take a vote.
In my perspective, when we lay a policy on the table, which we've done before, and I've been here for 6 years, we've had policies that we've laid on the table. We've worked on them when they're on the table as a board, and the system has worked on them. And if it was at the approval of the board by the time we voted on it, we supported it. The system will email us their edits, their operational suggestions, their procedures, if possible, if that's what the board wants. And then the board can work on providing feedback during those 30 days. I think there is urgency around this, considering, and again, I want to back up and say, the time that it's laying on the table for 30 days allows our community to engage with this policy as well. And if it is ready in 30 days, it can pass. And the timing of that will coincide with social circle, will coincide with things that are happening out in the community around this facility that is being built not far from here. And the urgency is there. So, and I'm hearing this from community members, in particular in the area in District 5, where there's a high population of immigrants. Not all of the immigrants are Hispanic, Latino people. They're immigrants from all backgrounds. But there's a high population of immigrants who have fear around this, and there is urgency around it. If we can work on it at the same time, so I do agree with you with allowing the system to provide feedback and engage with the policy. I think they can still do that. And the timing of it being on the table with the urgency that's related to that can allow us to be able to work on it and pass something that I think everyone, in particular our students and their families and our teachers, can feel supported in this process at this time of urgency. If it is not ready in 30 days, like we have done before, we have discussion, we see the emails that you all send if things aren't right with the implementation. We work through that as a board, and I continue to encourage us to do that. And I also support, if the policy isn't ready, then we lay it on the table. It continues to stay there, but it allows us to be able to, if it is ready, and hopefully it will be, act with some urgency around this during the timing.
Well, I am all for the community providing feedback, so I think that's a good opportunity as well for everyone in the community to take action on this and give us their input.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I ask our board members if we can adjourn our meeting.
Madam Chair, If I could, just one matter I needed a little bit of feedback on. I know it's of some urgency with regard to our superintendent background checks. I'd sent an email out. I just want to get a general consensus that the board is okay to proceed with, my recommendation was to go with Prescient, which was the first proposal that I sent to you for a sort of tier 1 background check. If you're okay with that, I will move forward with that tomorrow.
Thank you. I responded via email as well, and I want to say thank you so much for the ALMA group and your work on the need for us as a board in the superintendent search process to be able to make sure that we are doing extensive background checks that's beyond and above the standard. And so there is a cost associated with this for the candidates who are in the semifinal round. And so I think that's, or who we're interviewing. And so I want to make sure that the board members are approval of the background checks. Basically, it's more extensive background check with the firm that they've already vetted. And they just need to make sure we're okay with that so they can proceed. So that when we do our interviews, we'll already have that data available to us while we're doing our interviews. And I think that's really important as we are in the next phase of the process, that we're looking at that data.
And I don't need a formal vote. I just wanted to make sure there was no objections to that. If there's no objections to that, then I'll go ahead and proceed with that course of action.
I support your recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you all, board members, and our staff, and Dr. Taylor, and everyone. Have a good night. Thanks. Oh, did someone? Oh, no, I think it just concludes, right? If there are no. Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good night.